Good afternoon. I am going to be speaking to you about the controversial topic of global warming. And this is a topic that I have thought a lot about, and it's something that seems to keep popping up in everyday life. You may have seen photos like this one. You have this glacier in August of 2009 and then July of 2011, and you can see the change in ice for the 2 years. So in a 2-year period, you have a shrinkage of quite a bit of ice. Then we have other photos like this, Glacier National Park in 1913, and in 2005, hardly any ice on that mountain. Another similar photo of a large glacier, and then the ice has disappeared. And then another photo of a different glacier in 1928, and in 2004, the glacier looks to be almost gone. So it's really hard to deny the fact that global warming is occurring with such photos, right? We all have heard about Al Gore and the effort that he's made to bring global warming to prominence. And this is a book that he wrote, An Inconvenient Truth, A Global Warning. And so he has done a lot with global warming and has been forefront in the environmental part of things and changing the environment to improve the situation that he says we are in. And so I want to just briefly talk about what is proposed, the proposed reason for global warming. You have the Earth, and you can see in the photo there, the sunlight is going toward Earth. And sun passes through the atmosphere, and then some of it is radiated back towards space. So when the sunlight, when the radiance hits the Earth, some of it is reflected back out towards space. But when you have greenhouse gas, which is CO2, methane, other gases, these gases will actually prevent the reflection of a lot of these sun rays. And so essentially you have a collection of gas in the atmosphere. Now, if you remember from elementary school, you studied about Mars, Venus, different planets, right? Mars doesn't really have any gases around it. And as a result, it gets very cold. But Venus, very close to the sun, has another problem. It has so much CO2 around it and so much methane that it gets very hot, so hot that it can actually melt lead. So you have the two different situations there, lots of greenhouse gases and very little greenhouse gases, and it's very obvious the effect that those gases have on atmospheric temperatures. And this photo is from climate.nasa.gov. This is a sort of government site on global warming. And this chart is also from the same site. And so you can see here a proposed CO2 level, and this is supposedly where we are at as of July 2013 at the end there. And you see it's quite a bit above this level. Now, do you notice anything strange about this graph, possibly?
It goes to 400,000 years ago.
Yeah, it goes way back, right? Now, do you think that they were measuring temperatures back then?
No.
They were not. So it seems a little bit strange. I mean, first of all, that it goes back so far, 400,000 years, and then the fact that they are giving temperature measurements. Now, what they do to get these measurements is they'll take ice core samples and different cores and look at the oxygen concentration in the ice and things like that to try to figure out what the CO2 concentration was. But it just seems strange that they would, first of all, propose it, that long ago, because first of all, the ice wouldn't be showing stuff that old because the ice is not that old. And secondly, it's hard to tell for sure if that really is the concentration in the ice. So it's, while these graphs do, make a very vivid image as to where we are now, it's hard to say whether or not CO2 levels were always below that level. Now, as far as the fact that we are at a very high level right now, that, is really undisputable. We are at a high level. So the stats here, I just want to give you some stats on, the global warming that is happening. You have sea level rising, and that's risen 17 centimeters in the last century. You have global temperature rising, decrease in Arctic ice, glacial retreat, as we had seen in some of those photos, extreme events. This can be said as more hot temperatures and more extreme cold temperatures. So what they're saying is that it is actually more extreme hots now than there have been extreme colds. And then you have ocean acidification, which is essentially CO2 going into the ocean. Now I just want to show you a little photo here on the website. This is the climate.nasa.gov site. And one of these photos here is somewhat striking. Global temperature rise. Does anything strike you strange about that photo?
It's the ground.
The ground, right?
Cracking.
It's cracking. Now, how many of you have seen photos like that before? I've seen photos, right? That's actually a desert, right? And that's normal. So it's funny that they're using a photo like this to talk about global temperature rise, when in fact that is normal in the desert, and you will find that even if you have a global cooling, because the deserts will still be hot. So you have some sort of, as I see it, trying to dramatize the events with photos of actual occurrences that may not be so striking to us if they were not put in with a global temperature rise heading next to them. It's just something to notice when you're reading the news and things like that. So current news here, this is what the current news is proposing. As of in the last month, there's been headlines on the pause in the global warming and the trade winds, and possibly that it's not occurring. And so I want to talk a little bit about this proposed pause. Here's the article, Who Pressed the Pause Button, from The Economist, and a very interesting photo there. And what they're saying is that there has been a slowdown in global warming. And from the 1990s to 1998, the global temperature was increasing 0.18 degrees Celsius every year. And then from 1998 to 2004, it was increasing only 0.04 degrees Celsius. So there is a slowing of the temperature rising. However, at the same time of this slowing, the greenhouse gases are not decreasing. So the rising CO2 levels are still increasing. Those CO2 levels have not decreased at all while the temperature has decreased. So there appears to be some sort of conundrum as to what the actual, what is actually occurring. So what's proposed in this article is that there's a solar output fluctuation. So in the last several years, the solar output is actually lower than it has been in the past. And then you have volcanoes. Volcanoes put pollution in the air that prevents sunlight from actually reaching the earth. So that can cool the earth. Pollution will actually do the same thing. So while pollution, can increase the greenhouse effect, it can also prevent the heating of the earth by preventing the rays from actually penetrating. And then you have the trade winds. Now the trade winds are the most talked about and seem to be the most explained event. And that is essentially where you have east to west winds, west to east winds moving. And so it pushes warmer ocean air, warmer waters underneath, and it switches out the colder water. So it causes sort of a circular effect in the oceans, which brings colder waters to the surface and ends up cooling the atmosphere. So while the oceans do warm a little bit, they end up cooling the atmosphere. So there does appear to be a pause in the global warming. Now, at the same time, you have other people saying that climate change is completely natural. Here is a site, this was from Express, the Express news site in the UK, and 100 reasons why climate change is natural, and they list a whole bunch of reasons. So, such as, there is no scientific proof, man-made carbon emissions constitute less than the 0.00022% totally naturally emitted from the mantle of the earth during geological history. So just, very strange things that they're proposing here. And what you have to consider is the fact that global warming is going to be controversial, that there is going to be both sides to the issue. And when you look at it through history, there have been times when global temperatures have increased and decreased. Back in the 1600s, the Vikings actually farmed and lived on Greenland. And then they were driven off, some say because they were trying to find new areas, but there has been studies that have looked at the actual CO2 levels there using the same core technique, and they have found that CO2 levels dropped in that time, and that caused the temperature drop. And so they're saying that the temperatures dropped dramatically, which caused the farming season to get much shorter, which caused them to have to leave because they were not able to grow their food. So you have this sort of natural oscillations in the climate, and the science behind it is somewhat hard to put a finger on as to whether or not it's very accurate. And so I just would like to hear what you might have to say and any of your thoughts on the global warming topic and whether or not it actually is occurring or it's just something that appears to be occurring.